I'm back.
Yep, you're back.
Yeah, I was still moving and you were frozen.
Oh
So
no.
I don't know what happened. And then as I was doctoring around, getting ready to send you a message, it just quit entirely. So anyway, but I was, if I remember where I was when you made your comment. Oh, had you heard me when I talked about what our plan was for having Russians trained, at least one Russian trained on each of our commercial vehicles,
Mhm.
and having an American trained on Soyuz? And that was for the contingency that one of these days will arise. It never has yet, but we will have one day when we'll have a medical emergency and we got to get a crew member back to Earth. And because the Russian vehicles only carry a crew of 3. So that means if somebody is really sick and needs to get back to Earth, you're going to send 3 people. You're going to send a complete crew, because you don't have a way to leave somebody there hoping that we'll find a way for them to get home later on. And so in our way of thinking, we wanted to always have an American who could fly on any of the 3 commercial crew, the 3 crew vehicles available. And we wanted to have the same from the Russian, so that if there was a Russian crew member that fell ill and we had to get them back in an emergency, we could either put them in an American commercial vehicle, or we could put them in a Soyuz, and we'd have representation from both sides on board as we were bringing people back home. So that was the rationale back then. The big difference, and the piece that we have to see whether it works out or not, is they knew that as a result of our having our own capability, we were not going to pay a dime to fly. And so it was truly we were then going to be in the barter system for everybody. The way that, are you familiar with the way that the International Space Station operates in terms of people flying there and doing things on station?
Not really.
Ever hear anybody talk about the barter system? Well, we use the barter system as our method of payment on the International Space Station. So an agency that for example, an agency that wants an opportunity to fly a crew member will contribute something, usually a piece of hardware or a group of experiments or something else, maybe money that they contribute to the space station program. And for that, depending on how big it is, they get 1, 2, or more flight crew opportunities. So because the Russians and the Americans are the basic owners, not owners, but they're the providers of the major components of the International Space Station, then we always get to have as many people as we want. So we could have all 3, in an increment, or well, not really while we're working on Soyuz, but we could have 2 and 1. We could have 1 and 2, or bringing in the international partners. We generally like to have it 1-1-1, where we had a Russian, an American, and 1 other foreign partner to fly. As a general rule, though, on Soyuz, it was mostly 2 Russians and 1 other, because all the others get counted in the U.S. complement. So because we had a big interest in station monetarily, then we almost always had 3. We almost always could put 2 out of the 3 people on if we wanted to. And we usually use 1 of our seats for a foreign partner, for somebody else out of a European, a Japanese, or a Canadian to fly with the Russians and the Americans. And so the commercial crew vehicle has now given us a capability of engaging in barter with everybody. So Russians get a free seat on American vehicles. We get a free seat on the Russian, I keep saying Soviet, on the Russian Soyuz, because it is a Soyuz, it is a Soviet vehicle, just now flown in the Russian era. And then the international partners, depending on what they've contributed, they get a seat on either vehicle also.
Have you noticed changes in the cooperative relationship from the 90s until today, or has the relationship between the 2 space agencies managed to stay away from politics?
Because I'm not there, I don't have firsthand knowledge, but in talking to my friends, the relationship at work, it has not changed. The relationship in Moscow is dramatically changed. And our team over there says that they were up until, I want to say, probably my last year, up until 2016, 2017, Americans moved freely around Moscow and everything. They didn't feel intimidated or anything. But starting about that time, as we were beginning to have more and more diplomatic issues with the Russians, then they began to move more and more toward a hard line, even on our astronauts and families, and our flight controllers and families. For example, they felt sometimes they were being followed by the secret police. They were being questioned more often than they had ever been before. Sometimes they were stopped. Nothing dramatic, but just enough to kind of intimidate you and make you feel uncomfortable. So that was reported to us back as early as 2016, 2017. And I don't think anything has dramatically worsened, but it hasn't gotten better either.
Do you see the possibility of cooperation with, I mean, I know that the ISS is, not going to be there forever. What do you see as, in your, hopes and dreams, what would you see as the next step in U.S. Russian space cooperation?
Well, again, because we planned all this stuff out, we really did, and we had a pretty good plan in place. Our hope was that sometime in the 2024 to 2028 timeframe, because the engineers tell us that the International Space Station can probably survive until 2027, 2028 from an engineering perspective. You may know, if you follow it at all, it seems like several times a year now, everybody has to migrate into the Russian segment, if not get into a Soyuz while the ground does some leak checks and trying to figure out. There's this very gradual leak somewhere in the U.S. segment, and we don't. The issue is we don't know where it is. We don't know exactly where it is. So we're working really hard to try to find that out before it becomes a catastrophic leak and you have to abandon station. But that's an indication that it's not going to get better. The other thing is solar arrays. We're on, I don't know which generation of solar arrays, but solar arrays really take a beating because of all the micrometeoric particles that just pummel away at them. The fact that the sun is pretty brutal and everything. So it's a machine, and people have to remember that. So our plan was that we all of us in the ISS consortium would begin to collaborate on helping the industrial entities within each of our countries to come up with replacements for station in the form of smaller, more specific orbiting laboratories and orbiting facilities. So most would be human capable, but some would be just human tended, where you take experiments up, put them on the station, leave them for 6 months or a year or two, go back and get it. But that's the only time that human beings actually are there, for a day or two at a time, to plant stuff or collect it. And all the partners, all 20 some odd nations involved in something called the Global Exploration Roadmap. The GER is the acronym. Everything has an acronym, but the GER was written by, I want to say, 25 nations, to include China, believe it or not. And it is the international unilateral vision for humanity in space exploration that started being put together way back in the 2007-8 timeframe, and has now undergone a number of different iterations. I think we're now on GER number 4 or something like that. But it talks about how we get humans to Mars, the value, the imperative of having a low Earth orbiting infrastructure that serves as the foundation for getting to the moon and on to Mars, developing equipment that'll survive trips to the moon and Mars, but you've got to have a place to test it in microgravity environment. And if the International Space Station goes away, what kind of vehicles can we use to replace that? So that's, again, that was the plan 3 years ago. And I don't think we've drifted away from that very much. One of the things I'm really happy about, I tell people all the time, and it sounds sort of heretical, I think the Trump administration, in the form of NASA, has done an incredible job of a term I use is constancy of purpose. They are sticking to to the vision and mission for the International Space Station and international collaboration. It's been that way since both Bushes, the Clintons, Obama, and now Trump. And while we all have made little forays into upsetting the apple cart, pretty much things have stayed on a pretty steady path in terms of getting humans to Mars. And I'm very pleased that even the Trump administration has not been able to upset that very much. That's the first term. So I can't tell you what will happen in a second term, because, you know, space has been very helpful to President Trump, and he's taken advantage of it. He has the Space Council and now the Space Force and everything else. But it's like everything else about a potential second Trump term. How much of that will survive once he's assured that he's going to spend 4 more years in the White House? He's already early on asked NASA, why the hell were they going back to the moon? We've already been there once. Right after the NASA Administrator announced the Artemis program that is really focused on getting humans back to the moon, and they had to walk that one back. So nobody knows what'll happen.
Yeah,
That's the big guess in the world right now.
Yes, it is. And I have one last question before I let you go, because I don't want to keep you.
No, you're good. You're good.
Well, in that case, I'll ask 2 questions. My first is, I did my undergraduate dissertation on the Vostochny Cosmodrome and the future of Roscosmos, and I was just wondering, you know, your thoughts. Roscosmos has had some issues.
You did your thesis on that?
Yes.
You didn't tell me that, Sarah. I should be asking you all kinds of questions.
I don't know about that.
Can I ask you, did you have Russian sources, references?
Not many. I think I had a few. At this point, it's been 3 years, which is a bit crazy. Nearly 3 years.
Can you give me a thumb? Shucks. Do you still have it?
Yes, I do.
Can you send me? You have it electronically?
Yeah.
Can you send me a copy?
I will. Yes, and it was written originally in English, and then I translated it into Russian. It was from the Russian side, but English is a little.
Don't send me the Russian version. Yeah, I'll take the premature version. You don't have to send me the Russian version. Give me a thumbnail description of your findings.
I mean, what I found was that, you know, it kind of started with me looking at the issues with the Cosmodrome, you know, workers' rights issues, mass corruption, delays, political involvement, and seeing what that said about, you know, Roscosmos as a whole. You know, their issues with the many heads they've had, their brain drain, issues with funding. And, you know, what I kind of found was an organization that is in trouble. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it faces some similar issues to the ones that, you know, we face, which is, you know, difficulty in attracting younger people, a bit of brain drain, some political issues, but on such a larger scale. And it was very surprising to me, because obviously the space agency plays, like in the US, such a huge role in Russian culture. And to see, you know, the serious issues and just the, you know, truly mind-boggling numbers that came with the corruption, I think was really astounding.
Yeah. Interesting to hear what you found, because I had never heard of Vostochny until I'm trying to remember the name of the head of Roscosmos for the bulk of my second term, prior to Rogozin.
Oh, prior to Rogozin, I don't remember the name.
I'll find it. But anyway, he talked about it all the time. You know, he was a I would call him an industrialist. He had actually worked here in the U.S. and he was an automobile guy. And he had actually, I want to say, had worked either for General Motors or had done some collaboration with General Motors during his time in you know, in the auto industry in Russia. And Putin put him in to head Roscosmos because of his business background as much as anything. And he felt that he, if anyone, could take Putin's vision for Vostochny and make it happen and get it done, because everybody else was either dragging their feet or stonewalling or doing all other kinds of stuff. And I was surprised at how open he would be with me. I think we developed a pretty good friendship, and he would admit that Vostochny was eating his lunch, that it was a distraction, that it was keeping him from staying focused on the space agency writ large and making sure that they carried out their mission and that they took care of people. That's just the kind of guy he was. But Vostochny became I think it became his downfall. And I think that's the reason that Rogozin was put in there, because he was so close to Putin. And he had been the sort of the hammer guy, the hatchet guy, to come in periodically and try to tell my counterpart that he needed to deliver or else. And the problems they had with it from the standpoint of the cosmonauts and the people in Roscosmos was it was so damn far away from anything as to be useless. And it really would separate them by great distances in order to support both Baikonur and Vostochny. And Putin talked about migrating all of human spaceflight out there, and they went, "You got to be shitting me." I mean, that's wasteland. And so that was what was going on while I was the NASA administrator, and the inside battle that I saw from my seat as the NASA administrator. But the corruption was something people talked about all the time. All those issues that you talked about. That's why I'd love to read your paper.
Yeah, I'll definitely send it to you. All right, this one is the last question because I am gonna hold to the schedule. I really don't want to keep you.
We can get back together. Anything for the daughter of my favorite person.
Well, she'll be very glad to hear that.
Yep.
Well, I know you've answered this a little bit, but in your view, what do you think foreign policy practitioners and diplomats can take from the relationship between astronauts and cosmonauts and the work that NASA and Roscosmos did together, and how can they apply it to the U.S. Russia relationship?
Yeah, interestingly, there is nothing that career foreign policy practitioners can learn from us, because we learned it from them. We actually, and I brought it to NASA even when I was an astronaut from the military. We deal with really bad people all the time. And we don't have the luxury of being able to say, okay, you go away, I'm not going to deal with you, because we either need the country for something, or we need resources, or we also want to try to help their people live a better life. And we know that in order to do that, we've got to be able to either reach the people of their country and give them something to look at. I always use Reagan. I'm not a Reagan fan. I hated Reagan. But he had that term, the shining city on the hill, when referring to the U.S. And that's the best way to describe it. And some other, I forget who it was, somebody else said we were the last best hope for humanity. And so I think those are the things that non-career diplomats can learn from the relationship among astronauts, be they Russian and American or all nations' astronauts, because we have an organization now called the Association of Space Explorers, ASE, and it's a collegial gathering of anyone who has ever ventured into space, no matter how, whether they were a trained, a professional astronaut or a spaceflight participant or what, they can join ASE. And the goal of ASE is to promote positive collaboration in space exploration among the peoples of the world, no matter where you come from, and to use space as a vehicle for promoting peace and tranquility, if you will, to put it in these lofty terms. And that is essentially what I think. Having spent a year working with the State Department after leaving NASA as a science envoy, and visiting eight countries over the course of that year with them, they are an absolutely incredible group of people. Really dedicated, really focused, and today, unfortunately, really confused and worried, because they are the ones out on the front lines, seeing people begin to wonder if America is really the shining city on the hill, and if the last best hope for humanity, is slowly eroding and going away. And that's something that the ordinary American has no clue, because we don't think that way. We don't think outside our little box, whether it's down here in Crystal City or back home in Columbia, South Carolina, or even the Waverly district, if I get even smaller. Unfortunately, is we don't.
It's 2:00.
We don't think globally, and so the importance of having a shining city on the hill or a last best hope for humanity doesn't resonate with us. And you see it more and more and more as you watch the media send people out to talk to the men and women on the street about this election, and you hear how divided we are, and how strongly people feel about Trump, who support him, and you wonder what planet are they living on, and so for people looking from the outside in at us, they have got to be wondering what the. In fact, that's what I got for my year going around. The first question on my, especially people that I had known before from NASA, when I'd arrive and we'd have our first dinner or drinks together, they'd say, "What the hell is going on? What are you all thinking? What are you doing?" So we got a lot of work to do.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much for doing this.